Okay, wow. So you've sent me a ton of stuff on Ben Affleck, Jennifer Lopez, and Jennifer Garner. Everybody seems to have an opinion on this whole thing, but I think today we can maybe try to like sort it out a little bit.
Yeah, I think what makes it fascinating is it goes beyond just like celebrity gossip.
Yeah.
It really kind of taps into like those things we're always thinking about, like love, betrayal, modern relationships, and it's amplified because these are incredibly famous people.
Okay. So where do we even begin with this? I mean, it seems like every time I turn around, there's like another headline.
Well, I think to understand it, we really have to go way back, right? So Affleck and Lopez first got together like early 2000s. It was like a total whirlwind, right? Media dubbed them Bennifer, of course.
Oh, yeah.
And they were just like one of the most talked about couples like on the planet.
I remember that. I mean, they were everywhere, like magazine covers, red carpets, you name it.
Absolutely.
But then they broke up. And then Affleck married Jennifer Garner, like a few years later.
Yeah, exactly. And that marriage lasted, a decade. They had 3 kids together and, built a seemingly stable family life.
Right.
But then they announced their separation in 2015.
Right.
And the divorce was finalized in 2018.
So all this time, Lopez is like off doing her own thing,
Right.
building her career, her own relationships. They kind of like lived these parallel lives for years.
Absolutely.
And then Bennifer 2.0.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The plot twist of the century.
It was a blast from the past. Nobody saw it coming.
It really was.
Yeah.
2021, they rekindled this romance.
Yeah.
Fans were just ecstatic. The media, of course, went crazy. And it seemed like, the happy ending we all love.
Yeah, I remember thinking like, wow, they actually, after all these years, found their way back to each other. It felt like a fairy tale, honestly. So what happened? Why didn't it last?
Yeah. Well, that's where things get kind of complicated. According to all the sources you sent, there were cracks in the facade kind of from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems that, Lopez felt insecure about Affleck's continued closeness with Garner, even though, they were co-parenting amicably.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I imagine it's got to be tough to see your partner, maintain that bond with their ex, especially when there's that much history. It's almost like, who does he really care about more?
Absolutely. And we also got to remember that Lopez and Affleck, they've both got their own baggage, right?
Right.
From past relationships. And all the trust issues and insecurities, those get amplified when you're in the public eye constantly.
Right. So even though they were putting on this united front, it seems like behind the scenes there was all this tension brewing.
Yeah, it seems that way. And then boom, last year they announced a separation, filed for divorce. It was just another shocking turn of events. And the speculation, everybody wants to know what went wrong. It hasn't stopped.
It's like a never-ending soap opera. One minute they're madly in love, the next they're calling it quits. And I gotta admit, it's hard not to get caught up in all the drama.
Of course. It's fascinating, right? But I think that's partly what makes this whole story so interesting. It's not just about the celebrity gossip. It's about, these universal themes, love, loss, and just how difficult relationships can be, especially when you're famous and everybody's watching your every move.
Right, because even though we're not, A-list celebrities, we can all relate to heartbreak, to feeling betrayed by someone we love.
Absolutely.
So I guess that's why it's important to kind of look beyond just the surface. Yeah. Try to really understand what's going on.
To understand the dynamics.
Okay, so we've established that the reunion wasn't all sunshine and roses. But, these sources you gave me also kind of suggest that Lopez feels really betrayed by Affleck, and not just for turning to Garner for support when they were fighting, but for their close relationship, after the split.
That's right. And this is where the metaphor of the whole Jennifer sandwich thing comes in. Because from Lopez's perspective, she feels stuck between Affleck and Garner.
Yeah.
That they're both pulling at him, making it just impossible to have a healthy, independent relationship.
Yeah. And that feeling has got to be a million times worse when you think about the constant media attention. Imagine seeing pictures of your ex-husband with his ex-wife and kids all over the tabloids while you're trying to move on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's important to remember, again, that these are real people with real emotions. We might be entertained by the gossip, but, behind the headlines, there's real pain and heartbreak.
Okay, so we've talked about Lopez's feelings of betrayal, but what about Garner? What was her role in all this? Was she really this manipulative mastermind, like some sources are saying? Or is she just a mom trying to do right by her kids?
That's a great question. And it's one that, we're going to really dig into in the next part of our deep dive. Because to really understand it, we need to consider Garner's perspective, Affleck's motivations, and the impact all of this has had on the kids.
All right, well, let's take a quick break and then come back and unpack the rest of this story because, as you said, there's a lot more to uncover here than just celebrity gossip.
Sure. We're just scratching the surface.
All right, so we left off talking about Jennifer Garner and what role she's playing in all this. It seems like everyone's got an opinion, right? Some think she's just the supportive co-parent. Others are calling her like a master manipulator. Where do you fall on all that?
Well, I think it's easy to kind of get caught up in this, good guy versus bad guy thing, but I think the reality is probably, a lot more complicated than that. We have to remember that Garner's been incredibly careful about her image, public image, especially when it comes to her kids. I mean, she has not said anything publicly about any of this, and everything she does seem to be focused on just providing stability for her children.
Yeah. Divorce is hard enough on kids as it is, but imagine going through it with the whole world watching. I can't even imagine. So it makes sense she'd want to protect them from all that.
Right, exactly. And, from a legal perspective, staying silent is probably a smart move. Anything she says publicly could be used against her in the divorce, especially with, how contentious the asset division's been.
Oh, that's right. You mentioned earlier that things were getting pretty messy legally. So what's the latest on that?
Well, the legal documents you sent say that basically Lopez and Affleck are at a standstill as far as dividing up their assets. It sounds like they both came into this marriage with a lot of money, and they didn't have a prenup. So that can make things really, really complicated, especially when emotions are running so high.
Yeah. Wow, that's going to be a lawyer's dream. I guess even for celebrities, money just complicates things, especially when a relationship ends badly.
Absolutely. And remember, it's not just about the money for Lopez, It's about feeling betrayed and wanting, some kind of justice. She invested time, emotions, probably a lot of resources into this marriage, and she feels like she was played.
I mean, it's got to be tough to separate, the financial side of things from the emotional.
Totally. And, we're really only seeing the tip of the iceberg here. All the legal stuff, negotiations, behind-the-scenes drama, we don't see any of that.
Right, right. Okay, so we've talked about Lopez and how she feels betrayed, and Garner's focus on the kids. What about Affleck? Where does he fit into all this? The stuff you sent suggests that he's kind of seeking comfort in his relationship with Garner, but that closeness is ultimately what drove a wedge between him and Lopez.
Right, exactly. And this is where things get kind of interesting, from a psychological point of view, because it seems like Affleck is really drawn to that familiarity and stability of his past with Garner, especially when he's stressed. It's almost like he seeks refuge in what he knows.
So even though he was trying to build a future with Lopez, it's like he was subconsciously kind of holding on to the past.
That's one way to look at it, yeah. And it really speaks to how our past relationships, can impact our current ones. We all have baggage, and sometimes those unresolved issues can pop up in ways we don't expect.
You can't run from your past, right?
Right. And for Affleck, his past is so tied to Garner and their kids. They have a shared history.
Yeah.
A bond that, you just can't erase that. And it seems like he's really struggling to reconcile that with, his desire to have this new life with Lopez.
Yeah. It's like he's caught between two worlds. You have the excitement and the passion of this rekindled romance with Lopez, and then you have the comfort and familiarity of his family life with Garner.
And trying to manage those two worlds, it's incredibly complex, especially when you add in the media.
So it's not just about romantic love then. It's about family loyalty and, yeah, the past just keeps coming back up. And all of that is just playing out so publicly.
Yeah. And the media, honestly, they just make everything so much bigger, right? Every little interaction between Affleck, Garner, and Lopez, it's analyzed to death and then blown out of proportion.
Oh, yeah. They can't even grab coffee without setting off a media frenzy about a love triangle or getting back together. Yeah. It's got to make their lives so much harder.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Imagine trying to, just talk to your ex about the kids.
Yeah.
Knowing that there could be paparazzi everywhere ready to twist your words and sell a story.
It's like living in a fishbowl. I can't imagine.
Right. And it really says a lot about how we consume celebrity news.
Yeah.
We're so quick to judge, to take sides, to basically turn these people into characters like a soap opera.
We forget they're real people with real feelings. We get so caught up in the gossip and the drama that we don't even think about, the human cost.
That's true. And we also have to remember that even though we have all these sources, all this information, we're never going to really know everything. We only see what the media chooses to show us.
Yeah.
And often that's a really distorted view of what's actually going on.
That's true. We get a little glimpse into their lives, but we're not there for the conversations, the quiet moments, the things that actually shape their decisions.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to be a little critical,
Right.
and to have some empathy. These are real people dealing with a really tough situation.
Yeah.
And we should try to understand their perspective instead of just judging them.
So where do we go from here? What are the big takeaways from what we've learned so far?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is that relationships are complicated. I mean, even for celebrities, they're messy, unpredictable, and a lot of it's just out of our control.
And fame just adds another layer of, well, everything. The media scrutiny, the public pressure. I mean, how do you have any privacy at all?
Right. And I think this story also highlights, how important communication and boundaries are, especially with co-parenting after a divorce. It seems pretty clear that Affleck and Garner have very different ideas about what kind of closeness is okay. And that seems to have been a big factor in his marriage to Lopez, breaking down.
So being clear about how you communicate and setting healthy boundaries, that's key to making these kinds of situations work.
I think so, yeah. And it's not just about you and protecting your emotions. It's also about setting a good example for your kids, showing them how to handle these complex relationships in a healthy way.
Right. That makes sense. But I mean, there's still the question of what happens next. Are Lopez and Affleck going to co-parent effectively? Will Garner and Affleck stay close, or will that relationship change? And how does Lopez move on from all this?
Oh, those are great questions. But unfortunately, I don't have the answers. But I think we can all agree that this story isn't over. We'll have to wait and see what happens next.
We've been talking about the media and how famous they are, but I think this whole situation speaks to something that's true for everyone. We all have exes, we all have baggage, and sometimes those past relationships, they follow us.
That's a good point. It all comes back to, how powerful the past can be. We think we've moved on, but then those experiences, they still affect us, even if we don't realize it.
So it's not just celebrities and their messy love triangles. It's about, the human experience, about dealing with love, loss, and how complicated it is to connect with other people.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's ultimately why this story is so fascinating. It reflects our own struggles, our own desires for love and, to belong, and our fear of betrayal and heartbreak.
You've definitely given me a lot to think about. Before we wrap up, though, is there anything else from these sources that we should highlight about the legal stuff or how all this is affecting the kids?
Yeah, there is one more thing that I think is worth mentioning. Even with the legal battle still going on, both Affleck and Lopez seem committed to, co-parenting their kids and trying to keep things stable for them. They've been seen together at school events and family outings, and it sounds like they're really trying to stay united for the sake of their children.
That's good to hear. It sounds like they're putting the kids first, even with all their personal issues.
Yeah. It really shows their maturity and commitment to making sure their children's needs are met. It's a good reminder that even with a very public, very messy divorce, it's still possible to put the kids first.
And that's definitely an important message for everyone.
It is. It's a reminder that even in the hardest times, there's still hope, and we can be resilient.
Man, this has been quite the deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much about, well, celebrity relationships, the legal side of divorce, and all the psychology behind love, loss, and family.
It has been fascinating, hasn't it? And it's a reminder that even in Hollywood, behind all the glitz and glamour, these are real people going through real challenges.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm definitely ready for a break from the Jennifer triangle. But something tells me this story isn't over yet.
It's true. It's not.
Mm.
And we'll definitely be keeping an eye on it to see what happens next. But for now, I hope this deep dive has given you all some things to think about celebrity, relationships, and, just the power of the human spirit to get through anything.
It definitely has. Thanks for joining us today, everyone. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into, well, who knows what. Yeah, it really makes you think, even these celebrities who seem to have it all, they still go through stuff.
Yeah. And sometimes it happens, with everybody watching.
Yeah.
Every little thing analyzed and dissected by, the media and millions of fans.
It makes you realize that, fame comes with a price. You trade privacy for, I guess, recognition. And suddenly your personal life, it's just public.
I think this particular story also brings up something like a double standard that women in Hollywood face.
Mm.
Lopez is being painted as the bitter, vindictive one for feeling betrayed.
Mm.
But Garner is, praised for putting her kids first.
That's so true. It's like women are expected to be the bigger person, always forgive, always sacrifice their own happiness for the family.
Right. And that could be really harmful. That makes it seem like women's feelings, I don't know, they just don't matter as much as men's. And it stops them from, expressing their hurt and anger.
So by painting Lopez as the scorned woman and Garner as this perfect mom, the media is actually reinforcing these harmful stereotypes.
Exactly. And it's so important to, I don't know, notice those biases and challenge them. Women should be allowed to, feel their emotions, to express them without being judged or labeled.
It's time to move past these simple black and white narratives, women are complex, they have all these different emotions, and they deserve to be heard and seen for, all of that.
Absolutely. And I think this story, it gives us a chance to talk about something bigger, about how women are treated, especially when they're going through something difficult.
Yeah. It reminds us that behind all the headlines, these are real people, with real feelings and, vulnerabilities. And we should respect that, not exploit it.
Well said. And I think it's also worth pointing out that, this whole thing, it's not over. The divorce is still happening. And the media is going to be watching every single thing they do.
It's like a car crash you can't look away from, even though you know it's going to be bad.
Exactly. And I think that's part of why it's so captivating, even if it is kind of morbid. It's unpredictable, dramatic, and it speaks to those core human emotions: love, jealousy, betrayal, revenge.
Okay, so we've talked about the media, how gender plays into all of this, and, the themes of love and loss. But before we wrap up, I want to bring it back to the listener. What should they be thinking about after this deep dive?
Okay, well, first, I think it's important to remember that even though celebrities' lives are so public, they're still, lives. It's easy to get caught up in the story, but we have to remember to be, empathetic and keep things in perspective.
And what else?
Don't underestimate the past. We saw it with Affleck, right? Even when we think we're over something, it can still affect us in, really big ways.
Anything else?
Yeah, be careful about, what you're reading and hearing. Challenge stereotypes, question your assumptions. And remember that there's always more to the story than what we see.
That's good advice. And honestly, that applies to so much more than just, gossip. It's about how we see the world, how we form opinions, and how we treat other people.
Exactly. So next time you
Lebih masalah walau ada urusan yang juga lebih masalah walau. next save it. Millisecond. ठीक है ना second. First. Time unit. Time unit.